Hello friends, today I am going to discuss about the CA final indirect tax paper. So the indirect tax paper has undergone a change after the advent of GST. So we are going to see the particular chapters and the relevant information regarding the CA final paper for May 2018 examination. So the indirect tax law paper is a 100 marks paper, of which the part 1 is GST Act. It is being tested for 75 marks. The part 2 is Customs and FTP. It is tested for 25 marks. Both CGST Act and IGST Act is being included in the GST Act for May final examination. So no particular state act, SGST Act is being tested. So that is very clear, because there are minor changes from state to state with regard to state GST law is concerned. So no particular state GST law is being included for the examination. And this CGST Act and IGST Act is being covered entirely. So all provisions of the CGST Act and all provisions of the IGST Act will be covered. If at all there are any new provisions which are going to be enacted, even those will be included in the syllabus. So any new provisions also with regard to CGST and IGST Act will be accordingly included. So let us see the portions for GST part. The first is constitutional aspects. That is, before the enactment of GST, the government had made some amendments to constitution. So the changes with regard to the constitution and the amendments related to GST enactment is being discussed in the first chapter, and the relevant constitutional aspects are discussed. That is the first chapter. The second is levy and collection of CGST and IGST. So in most parts of the entire Indirect Tax Act relevant for CA final, CGST rates are being discussed and the CGST law is only being discussed. So be cautious about that. The rates will be with regard to CGST Act only. So if they give rates, let us remember that it is only CGST rate which will be given, and SGST rates will not be given explicitly. The second chapter is with regard to levy and collection of CGST and IGST, that is application of CGST or IGST law, the concept of supply with regard to composite and mixed supplies. So composite and mixed supply is very important concept. The next is with regard to interstate supply. So interstate supply attracts IGST and the intrastate supply attracts CGST plus SGST. The next is supplies in territorial waters and charge of tax, exemption from tax and composition levy. So definitions, each and every chapter will have its own definitions, the definitions of various key terms. So that has also to be read along with the various chapters, because it is very important. The definitions are very important to understand the entire concept of GST. So definitions also have to be read. Next is with regard to place of supply, that is POS. The place of supply is covered in the IGST Act. So place of supply is somewhat difficult to understand, and place of supply has to be covered. The next is time and value of supply, and the next is input tax credit. Input tax credit is also somewhat, it contains various provisions and various detailing. So that has to be thoroughly studied. Next is computation of GST liability. The next is procedures under GST, that is the registration procedure, tax invoice, credit and debit note, electronic way bill. So e-way bill is deferred to January 2018, and from April 2018 it will be enacted throughout the country. So we have to read the basics of the e-way bill because it has not come into full-fledged manner. Accounts and records, returns, payment of tax including reverse charge. Even reverse charge is being deferred. Reverse charge for unregistered suppliers, with regard to unregistered supplies, is being deferred as of now. Refund, job work. Next is provisions relating to e-commerce. With regard to provisions relating to e-commerce, there is something called TCS provision. Even TCS provisions are being deferred as of now. Next is liability to pay in certain cases. administration of GST, the various officers involved and how the administration is being carried out. Assessment and audit, it includes GST audit and the audit GST audit carried out by the proper officers and the assessment under GST Act. The next is inspection, search, seizure and arrest, demand and recovery, offences and penalties, advance ruling, appeals and revisions under GST Act and other provisions. So, which are all not covered in the chapters above will be covered in the 16th chapter as other provisions. So, in entirety CGST and IGST law is being covered, but not the state GST Act. State GST acts are excluded. The next is customs and FTP, that is foreign trade policy. So, with regard to customs, a portion of customs has changed due to the advent of GST. With regard to imports, IGST is being levied now. So, we have to just check out those provisions also, because that is a major change. IGST with regard to import of goods is one of the major change in customs. Customs law is contained in the Customs Act and the Customs Tariff Act. So, entire customs has to be studied. And introduction to customs law including constitutional aspects is the first chapter. The second is levy of and exemptions from the customs duties. That is the provisions including the application of customs law, taxable event, charge of customs duty, exceptions to levy of customs duty and exemption from customs duty. The next is types of customs duty. Next is classification and valuation of imported and export goods. Then the officers of customs, appointment of customs ports, airports, etc. Import and export procedures, because import and export procedures, they might have gone under a little change. Let us see that also with regard to GST Act. All import and export procedures including special procedures relating to baggage, goods imported or exported by post stores, then provision relating to coastal goods and vessels carrying coastal goods. Next is warehousing, the drawback, duty drawback. Let us understand that the refund policy with regard to exports have undergone a change. So, in light of that, the duty drawback has to be studied. Demand and recovery, refund, provisions relating to prohibited goods, notified goods, specified goods, illegal importation or exportation of goods, searches, seizure and arrest, offences, penalties, confiscation and prosecution. The next is appeals and revisions, advance rulings and settlement commission. Let us understand that in GST Act there is no settlement commission. Settlement commission is being omitted in GST Act. The draft law of GST settlement commission was there, but in the final act settlement commission is omitted. So, no settlement commission in GST Act. Next is other provisions. Whatever missing provisions of the GST, whatever the provisions which are not covered in the above said chapters will be covered as other provisions in the customs law. So, entire Customs Act is included in the final level. Changes in the Customs Act with regard to IGST provisions are also included. Next is foreign trade policy. Foreign trade policy also there are few changes with regard to exports. So, the government has made changes to the various schemes. So, the various schemes with regard to exports have also undergone a change with the advent of GST. Even those revised schemes and the procedures must be studied when you study foreign trade policy. So, the first is the introduction to FTP, that is legislation governing FTP and salient features of FTP, administration of FTP and contents of FTP and other related provisions. Basic concepts relating to import and export of goods. This has undergone a change after GST Act. Therefore, those things have to be studied. Then basic concepts relating to export promotion schemes provided under FTP. So, please study the revised export promotion schemes, because some of the promotion schemes have undergone a change. So, you have to study the revised schemes and how they are being administered now with the advent of GST. So, these are all the major changes and the major chapters. So, please do study this, and if you like this video, please like this video and subscribe it. Thank you very much.